Joe Wood, who is also a neighbor in Congress Park. And he is going to give us an update on the office of Diane Degette. So thanks for coming, Joe, and go ahead.
Thanks for having me. I see some familiar names here. And I noticed there's 10 minutes on the agenda, but I don't know if I'll need that 10 minutes. I'm not the most comfortable public speaker, even though Zoom kind of makes it a little bit more, a little less harrowing. Like you said, I live in Congress Park. My family lives at 11th and Fillmore. I'm at 12th and Columbine. So love the neighborhood. And I was in Councilwoman Ortega's office for about 5 years. And then I started in Congresswoman Degette's office a month ago. And what I'm trying to do is just plug in at the localist level, because I think that's really important. That's kind of the city background. And let's see, I jotted a few notes down. I wanted to explain that our office is available for casework dealing with federal agencies on issues like immigration, healthcare. So I'll drop my phone and email in the chat, and feel free to share that with any neighbors that need it. We can also do like letters of support for federal grants and things like that. And I'm still kind of learning like where the intersection of the federal government is at the neighborhood level. So it could just be, you know, conversations and stuff like that, or there could be other opportunities to collaborate. So definitely stay in touch. Let's see. I did some work on the green team a couple of years ago. Oh, you're muted, I think, Victoria.
Where is her office located? I'm sorry.
Her office is at the Denver office is at 600 Grant Street. So right across from Cosmos and the Bakery Central and stuff like that. Let's see. So those are the things we can help with as an office. She's working on, I don't want to go through, you know, I don't know enough to talk about her legislative work yet, but just a quick overhead is I've heard a lot of discussion about work she's doing around the environment and around healthcare. And they have member-directed funding. She's worked to get some of that funding for affordable housing in Denver. That's probably the number one issue I've heard in RNO meetings that I've attended. And so, yeah, I just hope to hear about what issues you all care about. And if you have any questions, I'll do my best to answer them, but I'm pretty new. And so, yeah, but I'll try. Thanks.
Thank you, Joe. Does anyone have questions for Joe? Not right now. Well, Joe, leave your contact information, and thanks for coming. We also have
Elaine had a question.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Hey, Joe, Elaine Saris here. I used to do casework for a U.S. Senator from Colorado. Nice. So I will remind you things you will hear all the time. All politics are local, and most of the money comes from the federal government. So you have a great opportunity to get involved at the local level all the way up to the federal level, because the federal government plays such a large role in housing, human services, food stamps, every single thing. So love to chat with you, because actually we did contact Congresswoman Degette's office a couple years ago about something, and it's still a persistent or continuing issue. So love to chat with you about it and see where we go from here.
Cool, that's exciting to hear. I am so early that I'm sort of missing like the direct city stuff, and that's really encouraging that there is still that really local element in this position. And I think we met at the ice cream scooping
Great.
event. So
definitely get on every local committee you can get on. That's what I used to do. I was on the housing roundtable for the city and county of Denver. It's changed a million times since then. They don't call it that anymore, but get on every single thing, because you have the opportunity to make such, because of the council district. I'm sorry. The congressional district overlaying pretty much the entire city and county of Denver. And they're just large amount of money that's poured in because of COVID and CARES Act and American Rescue Plan that to help drive better policy decisions made at the local level. We would love that. Love it.
That's one of the reasons I'm tuning into the BRT conversation, to learn about some of those transit issues. And like you said, there's the ARPA and the Build Back Better and a lot of stuff that hopefully will work. So Eleni, if you would be able to, I'll drop it in the chat, but meet for coffee at Downforce or something, that'd be much appreciated.
Sure, absolutely love to do that. So
Awesome.
Great.
Thank you.
Glad you transitioned over to the federal side.
Thanks.
Good for you.
Good to still be here.
Quick question, Joe. So it would be great to hear back when you get more in the know about even what's happening in Colorado and the redistricting. How she feels about that. Does she think it's fair? So that's all. It'd be nice to know state level wise.
Redistricting. Are there any concerns in Congress Park specifically about which district you're going to end up in as far as council or other things?
Oh, I think they might be redrawing the city council districts too.
Oh,
right?
yes, they are.
Yeah. So, but that's state. I mean, that's our local.
Okay. So there'll be that. I guess it'll be happening at both levels. I'll try to learn about the federal one.
That'd be great. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you all. Thanks for having me.
Tonight we also have Hana Ruiz here, and to give us an update on the Denver Police Department, what's going on in Congress Park. So Hana, I know you have other team members here as well. So please go ahead and introduce them too.
Okay. Hi, Officer Ruiz. I'm the CRO for District 2, and I am in Sector 1. So you fall into the Sector 1 area. So that's my area of responsibility. I do have my partners here, Officer Rodney Sanchez and Officer Alain Habimana. And if you like, would you like me to let them introduce themselves? They can tell you a little bit about themselves. Okay, Rodney, you want to go first?
Absolutely. So hi, everyone. Rodney Sanchez. I'm one of the CROs with Hana Ruiz. I'm in my 27th year of law enforcement. I came to Denver from the city of Westminster back in 2013. Probably first half of my career was working narcotics, and about the last 15 years has been working traffic enforcement. I used to be a traffic investigator for the city of Westminster. So I have a lot of experience in dope and a lot of experience in traffic enforcement and accident investigation. Unfortunately, both kill people, as we all know it, but happy to be here, happy to help in any way I can.
Hi, I'm Officer Alain Habimana. I have about 8 years in law enforcement, all in Denver. I started out in District 6, did about 5 years there, and then moved over to District 2. Started out as a school resource officer, did that for a little bit, about a year, and then now I joined the CRO team. So happy to be here as well, and trying to see what I do my best to help out with the community. So thanks.
Okay, so everyone, Officer Habimana is actually going to be primarily in the southern part of Sector 1. So he is going to be more assigned to the Congress Park area as far as businesses and neighborhoods. So he's going to kind of be your go-to person, which a lot of the stuff is he's going to get together and gather information, and he'll bring it to us, and then we can maybe try and work on coming up with solutions to help the neighborhoods. So, but of course, we all three will work together. So you'll probably see all of us anyway. So, but he's going to be actually the primary for this Congress Park area. And so now with our stats, I will tell you, which I don't really, can't really, it's not a surprise. Everybody knows crime is skyrocketed. We have, I mean, like everybody knows, Colorado leads in auto thefts. We our property crimes are off the chart. We're getting more violent crimes going. There's a lot that has to do with how bonding measures have went. That all has to do with the laws and where our hands are kind of being tied. But we're doing our best. We are short-staffed. We don't have a lot of patrol guys, but they're working on hiring more people. So hopefully we can get more people out there trying to work on these areas, and things can change a little bit. So I'd like to tell you our numbers have gone down, but that's not true. So everything it's overall throughout our district wide. So your neighborhood is not just being the only one target. It's pretty much across the board, actually across Denver overall. Is there any questions for us? I also will have Officer Habimana and Officer Rodney Sanchez put their email addresses and contact numbers in the chat so that if anybody has questions for them, they can contact them directly.
So
I have a couple issues I wanted to ask you about. One is what frequent complaints about calling 911 and being unable to get a response and how to handle that. And Officer Sanchez, both of you, can you tell us what you're seeing specifically in Congress Park?
Sure. So, Victoria, when anyone calls into 911, calls are assigned a certain priority. What we call an in-progress call, so like somebody with a weapon or someone's being, a business is being robbed, someone's being attacked with a weapon, domestic violence calls. Those are usually your higher priority calls. Those are priority one. Those are usually your faster responses. Someone, unfortunately, like prowling, you have someone in your yard looking through windows, looking in car doors, jiggling handles, things of that nature. Those are a lot lower priority. And because the way our staffing is so bad, that a lot of those calls are taking 2 to 3 hours for us to respond to. And it's the unfortunate part of where our staffing is. Right now, most of our shifts are supposed to have a minimum staffing of at least 12 officers. There's nights where we're running with 6 and 7, if that, and that's including the sergeant. So if we get a shooting call, which tends to be more the frequent than the outlier, it takes all of our resources, and then sometimes we have to call to outside districts to come and help with our calls, and then that even expands it out further to what would take maybe an hour, 2 hours to even 5, 6, 7. I've even some calls holding out to about 8 hours. And then Charlotte, I think she says, why staffing so low? A lot of it's just been the perfect storm. 2008 to 2013, Denver didn't hire at all. We were on a hiring freeze. So instead of at least hiring to keep up with attrition, they didn't hire at all. And then you throw on top of the events of 2020, all the riots, the coronavirus, mandates, things of that nature. People have just left in record numbers. I think right now we're about 250 officers down. So even though we are holding multiple academies, we can't fill the academies. And then even by the time someone goes to an academy, it's 6 months for an academy, 3 months for an FTO program. So about 9 months from a time a person starts to by the time we actually get a butt in a car answering calls, it's taking that long. And we still have people leaving. I don't know if we're replacing still as fast as we are losing people. We've already lost 4 out of our district just in the last 30 days.
I thank you for answering that very directly about what's really going on. Can you tell us what is the biggest calls you're getting in Congress Park?
In Congress Park, it's mainly all the property crime, and unfortunately, it's the homeless or the unhoused. However, if anyone wants to address that, you just see a lot of it. District 6 has put in some permanent area restrictions for the homeless, which means if they actually go in there, they don't have to post it. They're actually being ticketed or even moved. When they did that, that is unfortunately has pushed all of those people into District 2 area. So they pushed them north, they pushed them east. a little bit down south. So District 3, where they normally didn't have as much of it, now they're seeing quite a bit of it coming to their area. We're seeing a lot of it come into the area around Congress Park, the area around Curtis Park, and then going up a little north into the Rhino area. So what we normally didn't have as much of it, we're seeing a whole lot more of it because of how District 6 has pushed them out of that area. So more homeless, more property crime. That's the biggest two things we see in Congress Park.
Thank you. Does anyone else have a question?
Yeah.
I have a question. This is Steve Eppler.
Okay.
Some time ago, the Denver Police Department changed their crime record keeping. They used to present information in tabular form, and you could plot trends, and they no longer do that. And the only information you can get is either on the map or on a shape file, which you have to have other software to use. How can I get more information about actual Denver crime incidents?
Oh, Hana, I'll be honest, Steve. We all of our data analysts are civilian employees, and as you can kind of see, we didn't present any stats to you either tonight because we're just haven't been getting them either. So that's probably a good question that I honestly can't answer.
Thank you. I appreciate your help.
Stephen,
can you-
I will address that and see if there's some way we can, if there's there should be some way that you should be able to access this. And then maybe we can, we can get that as well. So
Hannah, it's a bigger problem also because the Denver Post also used to keep crime stats, and they haven't updated their stuff since 3/16/21.
yeah, and I understand now, as Rodney had said, I get all my stats from our crime analyst, and unfortunately, I haven't even been able to get that from her. So I will address that and your concerns, and we will see if we can get somebody to give us some information on how to obtain that.
Thank you so much. I'll reach out through email too.
Very good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all the officers for coming tonight and meeting with us. We really appreciate it. Any other questions? Oh, Miles?
Yeah, and then Alain
Yeah.
after me. So Rodney or Hannah or Alan, do you have any, can you speculate why the property crimes are going up? Is it drug related? Is it gang related? Why the sudden rise? I know COVID's probably part of it, but do you guys, is there any specific things going on that you guys are looking into?
Miles, I think it's a perfect storm. So if you don't really recall, 2019, the state legislature basically decriminalized a lot of narcotic use. So anything that used to be a Schedule 1 or a Schedule 2 narcotic, which is heroin, fentanyl, cocaine, methamphetamine, crack, all those used to be anything possession more than a gram used to be a felony. Well, now all those are a misdemeanor offense, which means we don't arrest for almost all of them. They're a ticketed offense. And if they are arrested with, like Hana mentioned earlier, they're not holding anyone on bail. So they basically are PR bonding everyone out. So normally when we arrest these people, they're beating us out of the jail, quite frankly, before we can get the paperwork done. So that, and along with not prosecuting certain crimes or not holding anyone accountable, holding them in jail until at least a court appearance, it puts them out. I think it emboldens people, and quite honestly, it causes them to just commit or further the criminal activity. So I think it's drug use, it's the current court process that we have going on, current state laws. All of that's just a perfect mixture to create this storm that we're seeing, and I think that's what's driving up the crime rate. And because of it, then you get on to the violent crime, all the shootings that we're encountering. A lot of that is the drug users too. They're fighting for that, or the drug dealers are fighting for that area to go out there and deal their drugs. And we're seeing where they're, because anything less than 4 grams is personal use, most of them are only holding 4 grams on their person. They're selling that 4 grams. So in case if they get contacted by a law enforcement officer, they only have a misdemeanor offense on them. They sell their 4 grams, they go back off, they restock their inventory to say, with another 4 grams, they go out, they sell it, they go back. And so this constant back and forth. Then you have other people come in trying to retake that territory. It leads to a shooting. And that's why you're starting to see why we've had so many shootings, and our homicide rate is at record levels for last year, this year.
So I assume you guys are in contact with Beth McCain. McCann.
Miles, also, I think if you go and you see, our chief has given several interviews. He gave one to CBS 4 Denver, KDVR 31, the Gazette, and he's expressed these same frustrations. He candidly lays it out. I think the article that he gave with the Denver Gazette probably is by far the most thorough and quite detailed, honestly.
Okay,
Elaine?
so no
Sorry.
response from her office, basically.
I think there was in there where they reached out for a contact and they didn't receive comment in time for it to be published. So
Okay, thank you.
absolutely.
Hi, I just have a question of any of the officers or all of the officers, if you know. Can you tell us either anecdotally or whether or not you know specifically how much time or effort is spent in terms of officer response to addressing the unhoused neighbors, so people who are being swept? Do you have any idea of how many of those calls come in and how many of those are responded to? And is that 5% of your time or 10%?
Personally, our team, because we did away with our homeless outreach team before the summer, we are tasked with all issues that pertain to every neighborhood within District 2. Since my specialty is traffic, I'm supposed to be out doing more traffic education, traffic enforcement. I can tell you in the last year, I've done less than 5% of that. And Hana, I'm sure, can attest to, we probably spend 90% of our time dealing with the unhoused.
Because I think that there are funding mechanisms and processes to take care of that. And I feel that we're misdirecting resources of your time when you could be spent doing things that might be more productive and more along. I mean, I get that you're not a social worker, you're not an expert in housing assistance, and yet I know that oftentimes we give vouchers to the police or to the sheriff's department to pass out to unhoused people, and that makes sense if you need it on occasion, but I don't think that's 100% of your, like, that's not what you go to the academy for to learn about. I'm imagining you would have done that if you wanted to become a social worker. So, right. I mean, I think it's helpful that you understand and appreciate that, but I know that that's not kind of where you're coming from. So I think for us and for people in Congress Park and the RNO, we need to ask our elected officials the federal government has lots of money for unhoused neighbors that could have been used to house people, and resources could be directed more appropriately. Because I think it's super expensive to have a well-trained police officer conducting a sweep, somebody who we've gone through the police academy, you know what I mean, to do that versus somebody needs housing and referral assistance and needs an intervention to get medical care and things that are more human service related.
I absolutely agree. And I think you won't get any argument out of any of us. But what we've seen is Host is supposed to be taking care of this. Their budget this year actually exceeds the police department's budget. But all these calls are supposed to go to Host, but as what we have seen, no matter what goes to Host or any other agency, whether it be Denver Human Services, Host, it all ends up coming back to us, and then we get tasked to then we have to go out there and take care of it. And I agree. It seems like this vicious circle We want out of it badly because we think that, this is why all this money's been spent. This is why the Denver taxpayers voted on a bond initiative and a sales tax increase, but yet the police department is still the tip of the spear, unfortunately, for us to go out and deal with it. And our resources, as minimal as they are, need to be elsewhere.
I appreciate your candor and sharing that with us. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Are there any other questions for the officers? Okay. Thank you, all three of you, for coming.
Thank you for having us, Victoria.
Thank you. Absolutely.
Do we have a representative here for BRT? Maggie, did you hear from anyone from BRT?
I would not hear from them directly. They would have to sign in like anyone else. So if they didn't register,
Well, okay. All right, I'll just move on and follow up with them, which ironically, I was just going to make an announcement about what the RNO has done to address our solid waste debacle that has been going on with moving all the bins to the street. So I'm just going to review what we've done. After the short notice the city gave and implemented the bins moved to the street, we invited them to come out and look at the actual situation. And they came and they said they should have visited first, but they did not change anything. We invited solid waste to 2 meetings. They came to the first one and got feedback from the neighbors. They changed nothing. They didn't solve any of the problems we were having. We had a second meeting in December, and at the last minute, they canceled. We did a survey of the neighborhood and sent that information along with a letter requesting that they change their policy, revisit what they've done. And we have received no response from them. The neighbors, the results of the survey were overwhelmingly, the neighbors feel like it doesn't work. They don't understand why it's been done. And honestly, solid waste has not been able to come up with any answers. We have notified Chris Hines and asked for his help, and he has also completely ignored us. We've received a lot of negative feedback from neighbors requesting that further action be taken, but quite honestly, as an RNO, I've done everything I can do. If neighbors want to organize petitions with their neighbors and submit them to the RNO, I'd be happy to coalesce those and present them to solid waste and Chris Hines. But I think at this point, the only way it could be confronted would be if neighbors were to organize together enough and demand an opportunity to meet with council and discuss why this is being imposed. If everyone isn't aware, Congress Park is the only neighborhood in the entire city that has their bins picked up on the street. If it's being picked up on the street somewhere else, it's because it always was. It was changed here as a punitive action. I also have tried to follow up on what's happening with the pool. And I've contacted 3 or 4 people at Parks and Rec, and I haven't been able to get any feedback yet. So that is all I have to report tonight. Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add?
Yeah, I mean, I've been going to the BRT meetings, and it's disappointing that they didn't follow up because I remember seeing the emails that they were going to send a representative to discuss
They
this.
asked for 6 months to come.
I
They
know.
really wanted to come.
Well, they said they are, but they're not here.
Yeah.
But
We
we
have a new
can,
person who's come into the meeting, Phil Hoffmann are you from BRT?
Yes, I am working on the BRT. In fact, 2 other folks are going to be also joining. We understood that we were going to be on from 7:40 to 8 o'clock.
You're right. We were a little early, but you're fine. Thanks for coming.
okay, good.
Good.
The others will be here momentarily.
Okay.
So then we can go back to, they were talking about the trash collection at INC. I think there probably would be a link at the INC website. And this fall, it'll be going to city council. They're going to want to charge for garbage pickup. And so you'll
Right.
have to choose what size container you want, and it's based on a monthly fee. And then adding to that, they're going to add compost across the city. So there'll be a new bin on the street. So the comments that came up from that meeting were, I requested more transparency in how they're funding this, that we know that the new services, compared to what they're charging us now, that, again, this new fee, is it going to be in excess of what they're collecting, and how will they control the fees in the future? Because that could just keep going up. And right now we actually are paying for trash pickup through the general taxes. And then my other issue was, I live on a street that's heavily parked, and they haven't even resolved the issues of the current recycling and the garbage containers. And now they're going to be adding recycling. So we're adding another bin, as well as I've got some neighbors, a neighbor building an ADU. So how are they dealing with the curbside usage for all of this? How is it being coordinated? And I said, they need to figure this out, because the planning department wants higher density, which means more trash, more people, more units, and this needs to be solved. They need a strategy for how they're going to deal with this. So we'll wait and see if anything is done. It's kind of disappointing how they're just kind of forcing this upon everyone.
Miles, there's been composting for a while.
But you had to pay for it.
Are you saying they will only charge for the black trash bin?
That
Yes.
was my understanding. And then the new one will be compost for everyone.
Compost and recycling for everyone.
For everyone.
Depending upon what size bin that you select, is my understanding. My concern is, they've made such a deal about the single family units and the small apartment buildings with less than 7 units, which is what Denver City trash picks up. But when you get right down to it, the largest amount of recycling that is not done is from large apartment buildings where they're not being picked up from the city. And my question is, why isn't the city encouraging, or maybe even mandating, that these larger apartment buildings provide recycling, and in some cases compost as well? Because that's the take that they've been saying to people is, oh, we just really have to have more recycling. Well, if an apartment building doesn't have a place to recycle, it's not going to be done.
And
Especially
also thinking about, for people that have issues trying to get their containers down to the curb, now you've got potentially 3 things to bring down. So, that still hasn't been resolved yet.
Yeah, and Miles, you're correct. They're gonna charge everyone for the black bins and what size black bins, trying to get people to use the smallest black bins to push people to compost and recycle, which I think is a great initiative. But before that happens, we got to resolve where these bins are being put.
Well, I think that we could pretty much believe that there will be people who have a small bin purchased for them, let's say, in a smaller apartment building, and they don't have the room to put everything in. And where does that go? That goes to their neighbor's trash too. So at some point, there'll be people probably utilizing other people's bins, since very few people, at least in my neighborhood, in my alley, put their bins up.
Phil, are you guys ready?
I'm not seeing the other two participants, although they just sent me an email saying that they're on, so I don't
Yeah,
know.
but they're all called Phil. There's 3 Phils on the screen.
Oh, okay.
Phil, I'm on. Yep, and it looks like Brian's on as well.
Yeah, I'm here
Look
too.
at that. That's so funny.
So it's all you, Phil.
Okay, Abby, I think you're ready to go.
Yeah, perfect. Well, thank you to the RNO for inviting us to present tonight on the Colfax BRT project. My name is Abby Abel, not Phil Hoffmann. And I am from a firm called GBSM. We are leading community engagement for the project. I am joined by Brian McClarin here with the headphones on, and Brian is the project manager for the Department of Transportation and Infrastructure for the City of Denver, and Phil Hoffmann, who's the project manager for the consultant team, who's really leading the project, representing Parsons, and sort of coordinating all the consultants on this team as well. And so let me do this and just sort of share my screen for a moment. Looks like that may be disabled. I don't know if it's possible to allow me to do that.
I can.
That would be great. Thank you. Let me just grab it here.
You should be able to share now.
Perfect. Thank you very much. Great. And so what we were hoping to do here in the next 15-20 minutes is just give you a little bit of a project update. Hopefully many of you were able to join the community workshop last night. And so you were able to hear much of what we're hoping to talk through tonight, or at least give you a glimpse of. And if you haven't, we'll do it in the next sort of 15 minutes. So I'll give you a project update and then talk a little bit about the progress that we've made over the last couple of months, particularly around the refined station design concepts. And so we'll give you a preview of those if you haven't seen those already. And then talk a little bit about the naming, the BRT naming, really the process and the options right now, and the opportunities to weigh in on some of those options. And then talk a little bit about next steps and sort of leave it open for discussion. So before I hand it over to Brian McClarin, just wanted to recognize that this is a big project and there are several partners in the project, and really wanted to acknowledge them and thank them. So the City and County of Denver is working very closely with RTD and CDOT and the Federal Transit Administration. Also the City of Aurora, obviously because the BRT will run through the City of Aurora. The Community Task Force, so this is a group of individuals who really represent the civic and business interests of those along the corridor. And then finally, our equity and accessibility partners, in particular, the Colorado Cross Disability Coalition. We've been in very close contact with the Denver Commission for People with Disabilities and the Commission for Aging, particularly as we sort of thought about the station designs and how we make them as accessible and really equitable for community members. And so with that, I will turn it over to Brian McClarin to give you a quick project update, and then we'll get into design and naming.
Thank you, Abby. And as Abby mentioned, I am Brian McClarin with City and County of Denver's Department of Transportation and Infrastructure, unless I answer a question wrong, in which case I really am Phil Hoffmann. And I know this will probably be a refresher for some of you, new information for some of you, but bear with me as I go through a little bit on the project, and then we'll give you a little bit of chance for questions. And then, as Abby said, we'll talk about station concepts and naming. So the BRT is a new service to provide this part of town with enhanced transit options. It will run from Denver Union Station through Civic Center, out Colfax into Aurora, and connect to the R line out near 225. The yellow section, which is the downtown Denver section, the BRT will operate in the existing exclusive bus lanes on 15th and 17th, and provide service to enhanced transit stations in the downtown area. In the blue section, the big section in the middle of the screen, the buses will operate in what we call a center running configuration, exclusive bus lanes running down the middle of Colfax until we get to the Denver Aurora border, in which case that's the orange section. The buses will shift to running in mixed flow curbside operation, typical of the way Colfax operates now. Abby, next slide, please. So how BRT works, particularly in the center running section, is that it operates entirely in the middle of the street. The stations will be located in the center of the street along with the transit lanes, and they will be located at signalized intersections through the corridor. They're what we call a single direction station, so there will be boarding and alighting only from one side of the station, and it'll be the typical right-hand side of the bus that everybody is used to. Once the buses pull away from the station, of course, they cross over in the middle of the intersection and move on into the exclusive bus lane beyond the intersection. Because we have the stations at signalized intersections, we can allow left turns at those intersections. And the center running platform and the center running concept provides for less conflict between buses and autos and parked cars along the corridor. Next slide, Abby, please. The service that we're going to provide with the BRT, the daily service will operate 24 hours a day, 7 days a week through 31 enhanced stations. The stations will be located and spaced in such a manner that should you find yourself in the middle of a stretch between two stations, your walk is only 3 to 4 blocks to get from where you are to where a BRT station will be. During the daytime, we have a very frequent service, a little over 4 minutes in between buses, so there's not a long wait in between service to get to and from where you wanted to go. The service, of course, will decrease overnight to 20 or 30-minute headways. The timeline for the project, we are looking, if you look at the bottom of the slide, putting it into revenue operation in early 2028. A ways from now, but as you can see from the bullets above, we've got a little bit to do to get through there. So going back up to the top of the slide, right now we are working on the preliminary design, preliminary engineering, and the environmental clearances for the project. Preliminary design is focusing on station layouts and how they fit in the existing corridor, enhanced pedestrian and bicycle access to and from the corridor. Station design, station naming that we talk about a little bit later. We're also doing a thorough traffic study for the neighborhood, analyzing the existing traffic patterns and what impacts the BRT service will have on future traffic patterns, and the impacts that those might have and the ways we can mitigate those changes from that. And we're also doing a detailed parking study of the area and how the parking exists now, how it's utilized now, and opportunities for parking once the service goes into effect. All of that works towards the small starts rating application near the end of the summer here, and that's our entry into the ability to provide, leveraging our local dollars to provide federal funding for the project and provide the funding that we need to build the project. Also later on this year and early next year, we'll be transitioning from preliminary design into detailed final design, providing the detailed plans and specs that we'll need to build the project. The big star in the middle of there, we always will continue our public engagement and public involvement through the design phases. And I will tell you, it'll also continue through construction as well. Once we get the final design wrapped up, we will complete the FTA Small Starts grant application process to secure the funding that we need for the project, and move into the real part of the work, the bidding, the construction, bus acquisition and testing, again, going towards revenue operations, hopefully in early 2028. Next one. So that's a lot of stuff in a few minutes. Take a little bit of time now and see if we can answer any questions anybody might have. I saw some stuff pop up in the chat. And so if Abby, if you'd like to read those to me, maybe Phil and I can get some answers.
Yeah, let me see. So there's a question about design provisions being made to prevent jaywalking.
I will defer that question until I show you a little bit on the station designs. I think it'll make a little bit more sense there. Yep.
And then there's also a question around sort of traffic diversion and pushing cars onto 13th and 14th. And what I can say there is that we are, and I think Brian mentioned this, that we're the team is in the process of doing really extensive traffic and parking analysis, considering a lot of the questions like traffic diversion and how this will impact traffic and traffic flow on parallel streets. And so we will not have conclusions to those questions until likely the April timeframe. But as soon as we do, that is likely to be really the topic for our next community touch point. And so I would encourage all of you to attend some of those meetings and weigh in when we have more sort of conclusions to share with the public. Phil, is there anything, or Brian, do you want to share on that piece?
Yeah, I'll also say, in addition to analyzing the impacts and finding out what they are, we also are looking at ways to mitigate the impacts of the project on the adjacent neighborhoods.
And there's a question also about the maps only showing one lane of traffic in each direction, and just wanted to clarify that is in fact correct.
That is correct. Widening Colfax to provide additional lanes in either direction just isn't feasible, given the built-up nature of the neighborhood and the corridor out there. So the BRT project is a way to increase the people carrying capacity of East Colfax without having to add additional pavement out there. And so we do take a general traffic lane away, but we provide that lane for the bus operations to provide that 4-minute headway and continuous bus service throughout the day.
And I just like to chime in quickly, just for everyone's understanding. Left turns there would only be 2 left turns along the segment that runs from Colorado Boulevard to what's the other? What's the East High? And that would be at, I think, Fillmore and Madison. So at the last meeting, it looks like originally they were going to put a fence and they were going to put a barrier down Colfax, and then now it looks like it's just a painted 2-striped lane. So I brought up my concern of what is the mitigation that's going to be needed on those two areas where you can only make a left turn. So you cannot drive across from south to north anymore. So it's just something for people to be aware of. The traffic pattern will change quite a bit.
There's one other question. It has to do, and I should have caveated when we started this presentation. We have experts leading the various elements of each one of the the various elements of the project. So design, branding and naming, traffic and parking analysis. Those folks are not with us here today. They were, however, on the community workshop. We will have a recording of the community workshop. So for those of you who are interested, you can go to the colfaxbrt.org website and you can listen to that recording and hear some of the responses to some of the very similar questions that you have here in the chat. So I would encourage you to do that.
Hey, Abby, I think we should clarify. I just saw another comment in the chat saying that people will only be able to go north-south in a few locations. That's not the case at all. In fact, there's opportunities for north-south movement at every single signalized intersection along the entire corridor, just as there is today, and that will remain, just as there will also be left turn opportunities to go north or south along the corridor at every single signalized intersection.
And I think given the time, it probably makes sense to move on. I will just mention one other piece because there's a couple of questions that have come up with regard to sort of COVID, and obviously traffic patterns and demand has been reduced through the sort of the COVID pandemic. And so just questions about how that might be taken into consideration through the traffic analysis and parking analysis process. So Phil, Brian, I don't know if you have insight there. And if not, I think that's fine. We'll take it back to Charlie, but just wanted to give you the opportunity to weigh in there if possible.
Brian, you want to start?
Yeah, I'm trying to think of in a normal world, we can go out and count the existing traffic and have a reasonable understanding of, that's what the traffic is. The COVID world changed all that. And it's been a challenge for us, not only on this project, but every project that the city is doing that involves, some sort of a traffic count or parking analysis on, how do we get good data that reflects what traffic is supposed to be like or would be like without the pandemic effects. And our traffic team has come up with some really innovative ways of being able to go back and taking some of the, merging the existing data that existed that was taken before COVID, along with some new methods of being able to use cell phone tracking to analyze traffic patterns and put that all together into a comprehensive analysis that really does do a good job of reflecting what the existing traffic patterns are. So COVID makes it a challenge, and I think we found a pretty unique way of getting around that.
The other key point is that we're not just looking at today's traffic. We're also analyzing traffic out to the year 2040. And so we're looking forward to the amount of growth that's going to occur in the corridor per the neighborhood plans, et cetera, understand what those traffic patterns are like, and make sure that we're dealing with those issues as well. I also saw another note in the chat, concern about safety and the number of accidents. We're doing a very comprehensive safety analysis of the entire corridor as well. And again, those results will be available in April also.
Great. Well, if it works for all of you on the call, I would recommend that we move to station design concepts and naming, just so that you can see what it is the team has been working on and what the community at large has seen as well as part of the workshop last night. And more content is available on the website, and also the opportunity to ask them the questions that you're all raising here as well. So if that works, then
that's great.
Great. All right. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So, well, Brian, do you want to tee this up a bit before we launch in here?
So, the stations are the visible element and the fixed element of the project. And as we're working through the initial stages of design, we want to make sure that the stations reflect the iconic nature of East Colfax, as well as provide something that ties the project together with the neighborhoods. And we've spent a lot of time with our project team and with our project partners on coming up with going through different design concepts, different visions and different ideas of it. And those of you that have been through some of the other meetings have probably seen some of the concepts. And we've kind of aligned on a theme that Abby will show you now, of an arch concept for the station, and recognizing that what we want to do with the station is number one, the stations all need to reflect that this is a unique service. So they need to stand out, but they also need to be similar, so that that whatever station you're getting on at, you're on the BRT station. So they will have a unique BRT branding. They will also have a unique look and feel, but they also have to serve the people that will be using it. And we spent a lot of time on focusing on those features of a station that will make it easy to use. And if you look at, I'll use this picture as an example. If you look on the left side of the picture, there's a ramp, a slope that gets you from the street level up to the station. We've purposely made that slope much flatter than the required slope from the Americans with Disability Acts for ease of access. We don't want to design to the absolute limits. In recognition of some of the feedback that we've had from the visually impaired community, the station layouts will all be very, very similar, so that the slope will be in the same place, the ticket vending machines will be in the same place, the ticket validators will be in the same place, the trash receptacles will be in the same place. There will be plenty of room on the stations to maneuver around, as well as the stations providing both visibility to the station and from the station, to the station from the adjoining sidewalks, and from the station to the surrounding community. So you can see that there's a lot of transparency in these stations. And if you go probably 2 slides down, Abby, there's kind of a nighttime version of this. And that's the one. The station also needs to provide, in addition to being open and visible and accessible, it needs to provide shelter for the users from both, the sun in the summer, the rain and the snow like we're having tonight in the wintertime. So we're, providing an overhead canopy on it. We're providing the stations will provide a back shield on that to protect from wind and splashback from vehicles traveling behind the station. The stations located at the intersections, the signalized intersections particularly, that goes to the jaywalking question. This is where, the signals will be, and this will be where it is safe to cross. And so, and the access from the station will be at the end where the signals are. We're putting elements in the project to discourage crossing at locations that aren't safe on there, while encouraging, the crossings as much as we can to get to and from the stations and to and from the businesses that surround the stations. Next one, please. Look at the back side of the station. Again, you can see the transparency, and there's that shield. Oh, if you go back up one, I forgot to mention one thing. The stations also, if you notice these, they have a higher curb than the adjacent street, and a higher curb than we're used to seeing everywhere around. That's to provide level boarding for the buses, so you don't have to step up or step down, or the bus doesn't have to kneel down to get to the curb, or it doesn't have to extend a ramp out like the mall shuttles do. You'll be able to access the station or the bus right from the platform at the station. Much like the rail services are, both the light rail and the commuter rail services, providing plenty of seating in the station, as well as gaps in the seating to provide for our mobility impaired customers. Next one. And then again, the backside, showing the transparency, showing the splash guard. Looking on, transparency again, so that you can see through the station to see the businesses and the elements that are beyond it, as well as providing for safety and security in the station. The stations each will have their iconic branding, to identify the location and that they are truly part of the BRT system. They won't have 4 signs on them saying Colfax, but they will probably have a unique sign, identifying this is the Josephine crossing, this is the Madison crossing, to tie the BRT service to the neighborhood. Next one. Nighttime version of that one. A little bit different look of the canopy and the backside there.
And Brian, I'll just mention really quickly, these are the sort of 2 design concepts that the community and key stakeholders have coalesced around. And so there's quite a bit more refinement that is needed and that will be done. The stations will not be white. Not all the materials are representative of what they will in fact be, but they're just to give you a sense of the image and the design and the sense of transparency that Brian mentioned that will ultimately sort of end up in that final design, but much work still to be done. I am cognizant of time, and so I'm just wanted to look to Victoria and to the team. We're happy to wrap up, and we can share some of the materials after
You
the
can
fact or
keep going.
Okay.
You can keep going, Abby. The front side of our meeting was quicker than we anticipated, so you're good.
Okay. We have just, unless there's other, Phil, Brian, other comments, we have one section, wanted to share a little bit about our naming and where we've landed there. But Brian, Phil, anything else on the design piece before we sort of talk through naming?
No, we can go on.
All right.
So the other part that we've spent a fair amount of time on with this, and again, if you've been involved in the other meetings, you'll recognize this too, is look on how we name the service. East Colfax BRT is a great technical name. It's not a very catchy name to go forward with. So as we went through the naming process, we looked at some criteria that we needed to have for the names. The name needs to be simple, it needs to be easy to pronounce, recognizable, clearly understood, has to resonate with the community and the riders. It also has to be short. We want it to generate excitement and a positive feel. And we recognize that while we're focusing on the Colfax BRT line, we realize that we're naming a new transit service for the metro area, so that the name has to be able to be applied to not just the Colfax BRT, but a potential Federal Boulevard BRT or Colorado Boulevard BRT or wherever the next one might be. So we want it to identify a new service. It has to appeal to Spanish speakers, to be multilingual. Has to embody a benefit of the bus rapid transit operations, and we want it to have a regional significance or meaning to tie us to Denver. Next. So we started with a process of way over 40 names, and we funneled those down to the top 4 potential names. And the names that we considered, when we vet the names, we go through and we look at, what's the definition of the name? What's the Spanish translation for it? Is it recognizable? Does it meet those criteria? Does it have an urban dictionary meaning that maybe we weren't aware of? And is it a conflict with something, does it have a local feature that may confuse people? So through all of that funneling process with the agency review and the input and stakeholder and public review and input, we've got it down to 4 names that we're going to use our primary partners, Denver and RTD, to come up with a name for the service. And those names are Lynx, Pronto, Comet, and Runner. And all of those meet the criteria that we have. Lynx has some connotation where it's a sleek, fast animal, but it also goes to the homonym for Lynx, LINKS, that we're linking the community together. And the other ones have some consistent, similar type things. Runner reflects the Colfax Marathon, for example. So we'd like your input on this too. If you didn't get a chance to vote at the community meeting last night, there's a brief survey that we'd like you to take. If you go to colfaxbrt.org, the link there, that'll be open through the first part of March, and we'd love to have your input on the names.
And I'll add, Brian, that there's more context around the names on the website and also on the virtual engagement hub. And so I'll be sure to share that in the chat with you so that you can, that content will likely be up in the next day or two. So if you'd like to learn more about why these names were selected and some of the references that the names sort of conjure up in their Spanish translations, that's also will be available to you.
Thank you, Abby.
Yeah.
So Abby, next steps, where do we go from here?
Yeah, so we've mentioned this a couple of times along the way here, but really the colfaxbrt.org project website has a lot of the information where we are and where we're going. In particular, if you're interested in some of the feedback that you all provided for the station designs, that summary is on the website in addition to a community update from January of this year. And as Brian mentioned, we do have the survey, and it should be pretty straightforward on the landing page. There's a little button that says take our survey. So if you want to weigh in on some of those names, we really welcome and encourage you to do that. And the same is true with the virtual engagement hub. And again, you see the link here, and I'll do my best to put it in the chat. But this is more of a truly engaging type of virtual format. So you can learn much more about the project. And I would just say, look out for the next community touch point. A lot of the questions that you've identified here in the chat are great ones, and are sort of top of mind for the project team. And we'll be answering many of them, particularly around traffic, curb management, parking, in likely late spring. So stay tuned, please, and stay engaged.
I've got a quick question for Brian. I know originally they were going to put a fence up to stop people from crossing in areas, and it was a curb, and now it's just a painted line. And I was wondering, in the non-signalized crossings, so if I had somebody crossing, let's say walking a bicycle, all you have is two painted stripes in the center, which is the bus lane, and a bus moving either way. Right now we have a turn lane, so the pedestrians kind of hang out in the turn lane before they cross to the other side. So what would be the scenario if I was crossing with a bicycle, even to say a baby carriage or something, and you've got a bus coming from either side, and then you've got a traffic lane outside of that? How would that be dealt with for pedestrians?
In terms of what the center treatment is, we're still working through that. We've looked at a number of different options to provide a treatment in the center, from the center line stripe to a curb, and we're still way early in the design, so I wouldn't say that is set in stone yet. We have a lot of opportunities to evaluate that. But certainly, the scenario you raise, Miles, is a valid one, and we're looking at the entire length of the corridor and all of the crossings to make sure that we provide the safest both pedestrian and bicycle crossings that there can be. We understand that it's a ways to walk. If we expect people to go from one traffic signal to another to cross the road, that may not be the best way to handle it, because it is a long way. And those type of things are what we're evaluating as we're wrapping up the preliminary design on this is how best do we serve the bus rapid transit service, but also how best do we serve the people crossing the road. I think as Phil might have mentioned, it's a delicate balancing act to make sure that we're providing the most efficient operation as well as the safest operation.
Yeah, no, just more of a comment too, and I've heard this from somebody that with large vehicles, and especially if they have a lot of people on it, the bus drivers are not told to slam on the brakes because the people inside the bus get hurt. So then that means you hit somebody, that's an obstruction in the road. So it becomes a conflict of fast moving buses with a lot of people and potentially trying to get out of the way. That's all. But
I guarantee you that nobody wants that to happen.
Well, and Miles, I can also assure you that there's going to be significant driver training for those bus drivers, not just in their normal bus operations, but specifically in these dedicated lanes. So they will understand exactly the best way to operate these buses. And it's not a matter of, exceeding the speed limit, for example. That's not going to be changing along Colfax just because there are dedicated lanes. So the bus drivers will be simply using those dedicated lanes to move through the corridor more efficiently, more reliably, but absolutely safely. And they will not be jeopardizing people out in the street. I mean, again, the idea is someone asked, how are we going to prevent jaywalking? Well, you can't prevent jaywalking. You can't prevent poor driving habits. You can't prevent a lot of things that end up causing problems. But what we can do is to design the project in the optimum way to minimize accident potential and vehicle pedestrian conflicts and maximize the safety. And that's exactly the direction we're headed.
just want to recognize Alain. I think if I have your name pronounced correctly, you have your hand up. So
Yeah, I just had a quick question or comment. A lot of this got catalyzed through the East Central area planning process, which was less than perfect, less than community engagement, and less than inclusive. So even though federal funds were used to orchestrate that process, so we have serious concerns that the sort of second and third phases that the city and the partners may not have learned significantly that documents need to be translated, interpreters need to be provided, that you need to go to places in the community where the community is. So the expectation is that people will know to go to your website. People will not necessarily know to go to your website. We do the best we can to put it out through social media channels, out to do that outreach. But what we found in the East Central area planning process that they didn't engage the faith community. They didn't engage community centers, especially during COVID. Although a good chunk of it was done prior to COVID, they still did little or no outreach. And then once COVID hit, it became nearly impossible to do that outreach. So my concern throughout this entire process is now we're in almost 3 years. We're starting the 3rd year of COVID, and we're having closures and openings, and things are sort of chaotic. A lot of things are switching to in person with the city, but we're finding people have reservations to go in person if they even have noticed that it's in person because of fears of COVID. So my questions are, how are you going to manage outreach, manage engagement in a way that is not like it's been done before? And listening to community, I've heard a definition of partnership, of how the city should work with communities. And that is not how it typically happens, unfortunately. So it's more, here's some ideas, take a vote, here's what we think. We go out to the traditional people we kind of know about and we engage them, and we're not engaging everyone. And so I'd like to just make that ask once again, that we consider how we're doing engagement and start doing it in an innovative way in partnership with community, and not this top-down approach where we get to vote on a design, but we don't get to vote where the bus stop is, and we don't get to participate in the nitty-gritty decisions of how this gets rolled out to community. And we're sort of kind of going over on these little aesthetic things. That does not feel like engagement. It doesn't feel like it empowers community, and it just feels like more of the same.
And I'd just like to do a quick follow-up. Thank you, Alain. That there was a lot of that in the East Central, and I think the question I would like to understand more is, what are the plans? And I've not seen anything yet. What are the plans for engagement for the residents along the corridors? Because I know even with the East Central plan, after 2 years, there were actually some residents living adjacent to Colfax that at the very last minute found out about it and said, what are you guys doing? So, I mean, is there a plan to go door to door? Is there a plan to do flyers? Because this will be a major change. And what, how is that going to be done? How is that outreach? How are you going to engage? Because I think it's a great plan. I think there's some great ideas, but you've got to bring the community on board and let them be able to respond and understand to what's happening.
So would you like to respond, or would you like me to take this?
Well, Abby, you've been on the project now for about 1.5 years, and as have I. But I think maybe some on the call might be aware that some of this, the initial planning and conceptual design on the Colfax BRT corridor, has been underway for over 10 years. And so over that time, there's been a tremendous amount of outreach. Now, that said, have we reached every single person in the corridor? No. And frankly, in my 45 years of doing this, I've never seen that on any project, because it's just not possible. But there are many, many efforts that have been made in the past, and many more that are going to continue, not only through this stage of preliminary engineering, but also through the final design, as well as the environmental clearance process. So the outreach is going to be very extensive. Frankly, it's been pretty extensive already. There's a separate stakeholder task force that includes over 100 different individuals representing various groups throughout the corridor, for example. The public outreach, both by the city and county of Denver, as well as the city of Aurora, again, has been extensive. Thousands and thousands of names of individuals who we've reached out to invite them to participate. So point is that, again, it's not going to be some minimal effort. There's going to be a very extensive, continue to be a very extensive outreach effort. Abby?
Yeah, I would just second that, Phil. I mean, I think to your point about the task force, really that task force, the goal of that task force is to really represent the interests of the community. And so we lean on that task force to promote our engagement efforts in a really authentic way, in a way that speaks to the voice of those that they represent. And I can tell you, we've done numerous outreach activities to organizations along the corridor, including promoting these engagement opportunities with flyers, translated into Spanish as well. And thinking about continuing to do find innovative ways to ensure that the right voices are being heard at the right times in the project. So we hear you, and we are open to continuing to get better. And I would just reinforce that lots has been done and will continue to be done to make sure that this is a community-driven and stakeholder-driven project.
Yeah, I mean, I have been involved with this probably for over 8 years, but it's on and off. And again, as a RNO, we reach out and post things, but we just can't catch everyone. And so that's where, if you have a plan for what your outreach is, it would be great to be able to see what is being planned, what's in the contract, because funds have been allocated for this, to just get an understanding of where the phases are, what's planned. Are you going to set up a shop somewhere so that the RNOs can then maybe go, well, have you thought about, because in the East Central plan, basically, they didn't ask for any input from any of us on the steering committee. And they just did a plan and did their outreach and said, we're done. And it was just like, well, why don't you coordinate with the RNOs? Why don't you ask when the meetings are? Some of them are bi-monthly. So it's kind of like, again, another big project. Let's work with the people out there. Let's be innovative. I agree with you. But can you provide us a plan of what you're going to do? I guess that's what I'm looking for. I just would like to see, and when that's going to happen, a timeline for that.
Yeah, Miles, and Elaine, I can speak to that. And first of all, I want to say I really appreciate your feedback. As much as we think we may be doing a good job with outreach, it's always nice to know where we're not reaching what we need to do. And as Abby said, we can always do better. Are we ever going to be able to reach every single person? I don't know. But it's certainly a great goal. Where we are right now, as we're working through the end of preliminary engineering and the environmental work, we're also working on developing the scope for the next phases of the projects, because the final design and obviously the construction on that, none of that has been contracted yet. And the ideas that you guys have brought tonight and the concerns you brought tonight, we can certainly take back as we develop that scope for the next phase of the project, and incorporate that and make sure that we do have effective outreach.
Brian, I'm going to jump in here for a minute. I think you guys are trying to listen. What you're getting is the fallout from city implementation of the East Central Area Plan. And that has really poisoned the well in many ways. But the issues they're bringing up remain the same. As an RNO, we use our social media. You reached out to me months ago and I put you directly, as soon as I could find space for that. And I commend you for coming in the evening and, presenting to us. And we will make aware to those who aren't here tonight that you have recorded meetings. A lot of people do use that to inform themselves, and recently, Miles is correct, any number of neighbors have said, when did this happen? What is this? How did this come about? And it's been around for a long time. So I would encourage you to always work at how you're reaching out to people as
And I'll
well.
just add one more point to piggyback on Miles and Vicki. Along the East Colfax corridor, there's a great amount of diversity. Spanish is not the only language being spoken. And what we heard over and over again from the city, well, that's a lot of languages. We don't have the money. We're not going to do the outreach. I actually went to meetings where there were hundreds of people and no interpreters or translators. We had a person come to testify in front of city council. Councilwoman Sedabaka had to do the interpreting for her. These are the things she could not make her comments without assistance because no one thought, how do we reach people who need language assistance when we're reaching them in English only? No one thought about that step. And if they thought about it, we kept hearing it cost too much money. And then we come to find out there's millions of dollars of contracts going out the door to do outreach, but nobody really wanted to spend the time and energy doing it. So while I recognize that you might say we can't reach everyone, we consistently heard if the neighborhood is majority white or majority English, that's what we're going to present to. We literally heard that from an elected.
Lenny, I'm sorry
that to me is not inclusive. It violates civil rights, but this is what we heard. So that's my concern, and I can't stress it enough that if you're going to rush this like we did East Central Area Plan on the outreach, inclusion, diversity, then you're going to get little or no participation, and you will get letters that will probably be written to the FTA saying, hey, we don't support the project because we just found out about it yesterday. And that is not the process any of us want to see happen, like it's happened in other city processes where people get on board and find out about it at the last minute and they're against it because they don't know anything about it. They can't distill all the information you want them to have and they can't fully participate. So I just implore you to learn those lessons now and not assume that because you've done it for 30 years, that is the way to do outreach post-COVID, during COVID. I mean, it's just changed everything. And I'm super concerned about the businesses, the BIPOC businesses that are owned along East Colfax that are going to be disproportionately impacted by closures and construction of BRT. And what is the plan on that? Because the presentation I heard was super inadequate that was given by whoever's handling the small business aspect of that.
So let me just respond to a couple of things. So Eleni, I'm sorry to hear that that has been your experience to date. I can say, having been on the project for the past year and a half, that has categorically not been the intent, and it has not been my experience in being part of the public engagement process. I can tell you, I agree with you that Spanish is not the only language. We've translated our meetings into Amharic and Spanish. We recognize that there are multiple languages along the corridor. We've worked with the community representatives to ensure that we are targeting the folks that they care about. So I hear you again. Can we do better? We absolutely can. And I think your point is very well taken. And we carry the same set of values. And so I can't tell you, I guess I can't say that enough. So, and you're losing my last point, your last question about, Phil, I think you were going to weigh in here, your last point. It's
the businesses.
Thank you, the businesses. So yes, so what we did with the last workshops, we provided sort of a bit of a teaser We want you to know that there are representatives within the city and within DIDO who care very much about the impact on small businesses. And so wanted to share some of the resources that are available to small businesses as we move through this process. Much like traffic, as we get closer to construction, we're going to have far more details and far more information for those folks who will be impacted through the process. And they are top of mind for us. And I see Phil and Brian nodding as well. We acknowledge that this is an enormous sort of potential disruption, but also acknowledge the huge benefits that may transpire as a result of this project. So we hear you, we are aware, and there will be more information as we move through the process. But Phil and Brian, is there any other color that you would like to offer here on those two subjects?
Well, basically, just to follow up on what Abby just said, that is that we're developing extensive plans, not only from a design standpoint, but also from an environmental impact standpoint, to ensure that we're minimizing the impacts to businesses. I mean, just for example, maintenance of traffic during construction is a really important topic, and one that we've already started to develop a plan for, even though construction is still years away. We've started that process. Similarly, well, again, from a NEPA standpoint, there is an entire section of the NEPA document that has to address potential impacts to businesses, and to make sure that we minimize and mitigate any impacts that there are. The teaser that Abby referred to in terms of Joanne Greek's presentation the other day about specific assistance that the city provides to businesses. Again, that was just barely an opening salvo, so to speak, or kind of an initial teaser about what kind of programs will be available. And again, I'm talking specific dollars to help businesses be able to maintain their businesses throughout construction. The other thing from a design and construction standpoint is that we're working closely with the city to identify not only what the construction impacts are of the BRT project, but what other kinds of improvements need to occur, say from a drainage standpoint, flooding mitigation, for example, utility work that all has to be done, and to make sure that all of that effort is coordinated into one construction period, instead of dealing with BRT for a couple of years. And well, they're never going to tear up the streets again for utilities, never going to tear up the streets again for flooding issues. The idea is to avoid all of that and instead consolidate it into one construction period, again, to minimize impacts on the neighborhoods and certainly on the businesses.
Thank you. Thank you for coming tonight. We're at the end of our time now. Abby, Brian, and Phil, we really appreciate your coming. And I hope you'll come back again as everything progresses.
Yeah, thank you. This is really helpful.
Yeah.
Getting the word out and just getting people to understand what is being proposed. Thank you.
Yeah, and we'll be your partners in disseminating information and encouraging people. We've been doing it all along, but I think what you just heard is the frustration. And I know you weren't here for the first part of the meeting, but there's a great deal of frustration in our neighborhood trying to deal with the city over issues that are impacting us every day, and we can't get anyone to pay attention. So that is also part of our fallout. So thank you again for coming tonight. Thank you, Joe, and all the other neighbors that were here. And I think we should all say good night.
Well, Victoria, I'd like to say thank you for hosting us tonight. We always appreciate the opportunity to answer questions about the project and to listen. That's really our goal, is to hear what your concerns are and bake those into the plan as we're going forward. My philosophy in any project is that I want to make sure that we're not doing a project to a neighborhood, but we're doing a project with a neighborhood.
Well, this is a big one.
and there's more than one neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I agree. And I'd like to think we're collaborators. just, we need to tweak some stuff and just be clear and be available for people when the questions come up.
Well, you know, if you have concerns, there's nothing we can do about them unless you share them with us. So that's why we're here to listen.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone. And have a good evening.
Yeah, thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.